Hello, I am the Script Doctor, and welcome to the channel. It's the home stretch, baby! Only one more episode left, and thankfully, this one isn't all that bad. I'm actually quite surprised. This episode has some jokes. It does stumble at times, but overall, this is closer to the level of comedy I was expecting when I first heard the premise of the show. Yes, closer, but not quite at the level it should be. For starters, the teaser is quite odd. Mariner, by her lonesome, somehow overthrows the rat people, which look a lot like the Antikins from Star Trek The Next Generation Season 1 episode Lonely Among Us. Like the Antikins, these ones are discriminatory to a lizard species that they breed for eating. Mariner's actions essentially change the dynamic of the planet, a big violation of the Prime Directive, and something that Captain Freeman acknowledges when she arrives. While we're not given the context as to why the Cerritos is here, or what Mariner was originally assigned to do, Freeman does dish out some punishment to Mariner in the form of mandatory therapy sessions. After beaming Mariner away, Freeman appeals to the not Antikins by offering them Federation technology in the form of food replicators if they'd stop eating the lizard people. Another Prime Directive violation. Way to be consistent, Freeman. The scene ends on a poor joke asking if they can replicate protein pellets, to which the captain confirms. But if the not Antikins want protein pellets, why are we being told they eat the lizard people? Would it not be funnier if they asked if it could replicate the lizard meat? Something more direct to the conflict Mariner and Freeman are addressing? I mean, there's an opportunity here where Freeman could have gone into some type of 24th century infomercial regarding the capabilities of the food replicator, all for the price of not murdering a sentient species. After the opening credits, we catch up with Mariner frustrated and angry in her therapy session with Dr. MacLeod, a counselor whose running joke is to insert food analogies in his dialogue. We have a good conflict in this scene. For Mariner, the brig means that she was right and the captain was wrong, but with therapy, Mariner is in a situation that compels her to reflect on her actions and behavior instead of stewing in the brig. Dr. MacLeod suggests Mariner find an outlet for her rage, and we cut to the holodeck where Rutherford and Tendi are shooting skeet with Leonardo da Vinci. Mariner is still stewing off to the side when Boimler enters the deck asking to run a program he made to help with his upcoming evaluation with the captain. Rutherford nor Tendi actually respond to Boimler's question. Boimler just takes over the deck with his simulation, which is kind of a jerk thing to do. At least wait for them to agree. Boimler reveals that he used the crew's personal logs to create accurate representations of them in this program to help him gauge the best response. We get our first solid joke of the episode between Rutherford and the holodeck Shax.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Don't talk to me! I'm pissed off!
Whoa, amazing! We had that exact same conversation an hour ago.
Interactions like this convince Mariner that she can let off some steam without any consequences, and she commandeers Boimler's program, changing it from a crew simulation to a film, with credits and opening music similar to James Horner. Boimler, of course, objects to the change, but is somehow helpless and makes no attempt to recover his program to its original settings. Instead, he drops into the film's opening of a jet ski race with the senior staff. Boimler still makes an effort to conduct his research of the captain as the movie plays out. They're taken to Douglas Station, where Admiral Vassery briefs the senior staff on someone posing as a Federation ship on a second contact mission, and they're to find out who they are and report back to him. Boimler goes meta by referencing how the Enterprise would be issued this mission, but casually brushes it off as artistic license, as if he's defending Mariner's manipulation of his program. What follows is surprisingly a decent parody of Star Trek films. We start with the excessive lens flares and intense camera movements from the bad robot Star Trek films as the shuttlecraft circles around the Cerritos to showcase the ship, similar to what we saw in Star Trek the Motion Picture. It's a solid blend of the two filmmaking types and makes me ask why the writers of Lower Decks aren't treating the series in this manner. This scene is actually drawing from the source and building it as a parody in an effective way. It's not treating Star Trek as a veneer over another show, but using Star Trek as a foundation for humor. It's not a reference for reference sake as it has been with previous episodes. All that's missing from this opening is landing the trifecta of having the helmsman pilot the ship out of space dock, a task for which it is their first time, either by using impulse drive instead of thrusters, or the captain ordering to engage warp engines while inside the station. These are closer examples of proper parody by going beyond the reference. In Star Trek the Motion Picture, we get approximately a 4-minute tour of the exterior of the Enterprise while intercut with Kirk and Scott admiring the ship. That scene is parodied here, not just with the excessive shots of the ship, but also a shot of Chief Engineer Billups tearing up at the sight while the rest of the crew stares in wonder. It's an exaggeration of essentially heading into work. While the joke doesn't make me outright laugh, I can see what they're doing and acknowledge that the execution has some effort as opposed to just being a lazy reference. I have to admit, I was not expecting something that would be elevated beyond the previous episodes. The Cerritos starts its mission and is surprised by a Klingon ship led by Mariner playing the role of Vindicta. Tendi is introduced as a thieving Orion pirate that clearly makes her feel uncomfortable, and Rutherford as Bionic 5, who is playing into the role like a fish takes to water. Mariner concludes her introduction with Shempo, a Boimler mock-up that she kills immediately. Mariner and her team board the ship, killing 2 officers in the process and attacking the crew, demanding Freeman. For some reason, it only dawns on Rutherford at this moment that he can talk to the chief engineer and tell him how he feels without reprisal. This revelation allows for Rutherford to go on his own adventure in the program, while Mariner and Tendi shoot their way through the decks looking for the captain. Ransom takes charge and leads the defense of the ship against Mariner, but is shot. Boimler, still on his quest to learn more about the captain, holds Ransom and inquires about her favorite type of cookie. Ransom remarks how it's a good idea as the captain has a sweet tooth, but is killed by Mariner before he can tell Boimler of her allergy. Rutherford's story takes him to engineering, where he calls out Billups. But as much as the writer tries to hand-piss that Rutherford is going to chew out Billups, we already know that Rutherford likes his boss and is going to praise him for being an awesome engineer. Which is exactly what happens. The two end up working together to stop a leak by spouting out technobabble. I think there was a missed opportunity for a technobabble joke here. One where the 2 officers go back and forth stating more technobabble to each other as they build to a conclusion.
If we bypass the INDA controls and suppress the SAT events, then reroute the lateral circuits
to the dorsal conduit array,
and divert the overflow to the Heisenberg matrix, which will depressurize the photon gas for the recrystallization chamber, and that will trigger the xenon filters
and activate the main deflector,
which we can run the excess hydrogen through,
and activate the replicators through the transporters
to generate water, and with the freezing temperature of space,
seal off the leak and create a rudimentary plasma filter. Elsewhere, Mariner and Tendi are taking fire from Shax as he belts out a Bajoran one-liner in a not bad attempt at being an action hero with an oversized phaser to boot. This should have been a fun action set piece where we see Shax finally let loose in a way he always wants to, but is usurped by Mariner drawing a Borg head to use as a shield and bomb. The resulting detonation and entrails shocks Tendi. It gets worse when Mariner finds Shax's earring and tries to get Tendi to put it on as a type of battle trophy. Mariner pushes Tendi into acting more like a pirate and torturing Dr. T'Ana, to which Tendi snaps back and refuses to play along, leaving Mariner and the holodeck. Mariner makes her way to the bridge to challenge the captain. She threatens Freeman and demands to know why she treats her like a bad guy all the time. And when Freeman responds that she doesn't know Mariner, she admits how that's the problem. Mariner destroys her Klingon ship and disables the Cerritos, which crashes into the planet below. A crash we've seen not just in Star Trek Generations, but also in Star Trek Beyond. After the crash, Rutherford checks on Billups, who is distraught over the loss of the crew, but Rutherford explains how he was able to beam them all to safety. When Billups states how that isn't possible, Rutherford explains that it is a movie and they can beam anything anywhere in a movie. A nice little jab at the bad robot films. On the bridge, Mariner fights with Freeman. There's an exposition exchange where Mariner vents her frustrations being Freeman's child. Mariner pins Freeman under her boot and pulls a broken pipe ready to stab her captain, when a holodeck version of Mariner attacks the real Mariner to defend her mother and the ship. Of course, the only officer on the ship that can stop Mariner would be herself. So far, this episode has telegraphed the theme of man versus self with the therapy plot, and this exchange between the two Mariners is an exposure of Mariner's flaws. It's something of a reversal of the enemy within trope, where the real Mariner has become the enemy and fights a holodeck version of herself. Mariner proceeds to make fun of herself for being a difficult officer by exposing a solid resistance to the job she deeply loves. As for why there is this resistance, no idea. It's not explained, nor is it explored. We can only speculate that others expected her to be a rule breaker, and so she decides to prove them right instead of proving them wrong. Could this be a taste of Mariner trying to fight against a publicly perceived nepotism? That would be a fun idea to explore. To have Mariner be the way she is because she doesn't truly believe she earned the rank she once had. If it were explored that other officers in Starfleet detested Mariner because of her lineage, which is something incredibly out of character for humanity in the Star Trek franchise, then we would have an underdog moment for Mariner, one which we as an audience could buy into because audiences love underdogs. After all, we love watching characters that at the start of their story are getting crapped on by the world because most of us have experienced difficult times as well. We can relate to that struggle, and we have a shared desire with that character to overcome and succeed in the face of obstacles. But for Mariner, we don't get that underdog moment. We did get that moment with Boimler, as he is the one on the receiving end of Mariner crapping on him, so the audience has a capacity to like Boimler more than Mariner. How this battle between the two concludes is that the holodeck Mariner reveals to the real Mariner her subconscious thoughts about her friends, ship, and career, forcing the real Mariner to come to terms with what she's been suppressing this entire time. When Mariner doubts this revelation, the holodeck Mariner reveals how she's letting herself lose this fight to distract the real Mariner from the auto-destruct system. How was she able to activate the auto-destruct of the ship without being a senior officer or having 2 additional senior officers to enter their codes? No idea, but she was able to do it and defeat the real Mariner. Mariner finally facing a loss after 9 episodes has caused her to question her original behavior and make a change, almost as if she went through a character arc, which I find to be a miraculous thing to witness with this show. Allow me to take you through it. Mariner starts out in her comfort zone, breaking the rules, wanting to prove that her mother and Starfleet are wrong. She's faced with an unfamiliar situation of having to go to therapy. When Boimler activates his simulation on the holodeck, Mariner adapts the program to get what she wants, which is revenge on her mother. But it ends up with her paying the price of facing a holodeck version of herself instead of her mother, and the experience challenging her actions and behaviors. When she loses the fight, she has returned to her reality with new understanding, thus having changed. I like the fact that Mariner has been given her first character arc. I'm greatly disappointed that it took 9 episodes to achieve that. Had an arc been given to this character earlier, with a strong revelation, the show may have gone in a different direction and allowed us as the audience to enjoy watching Mariner try to be a good officer, instead of assuming and, with the help of a manipulated plot, being the best officer. Rutherford's story concludes with him making a strong friendship with the holodeck Billups and is distraught by the reality that he himself doesn't feel comfortable telling the real Billups how much he admires him as an engineer. With the program over, Mariner makes her rounds of apologies to Tendi and her mom, and we see the first instance of her dropping the ruse that watching the warp core is lame. Boimler returns to the holodeck to complete his research for his upcoming evaluation. What is strange is that instead of loading his original program, Boimler resumes Mariner's modified version. It seems rather odd that given all the obstacles he's faced in Mariner's simulation, that he wouldn't just restore the original program and continue with his original plan. But someone high up in the production of this show needs Boimler to learn that Mariner is the captain's daughter for 2 reasons. Reason 1, so Boimler can fail his evaluation interview by trying not to reveal that he knows the relation, and reason 2, so there can be a conflict in the season finale. Out of all the episodes that has aired thus far, this is one of the better ones. While it does still have an issue with dropping some references just to drop references, it does mind some humor from actual Star Trek as mentioned earlier. Mariner has a character arc, and there are some jokes that stem from within the Lower Decks universe. Boimler's desperation to please the captain to further his own career remains consistent in this episode, and while some of the humor may not have landed for me in his scenes, the foundation for the jokes is not an out-of-left-field approach.
How can I be the man, Captain? I want to be the man!
With only 1 episode left of this series, it is sad that only towards the end do we get one of the better episodes. Crisis Point seems to have a better understanding of the concept of Lower Decks, and made some solid attempts to actual parody. While it did miss some opportunities, the ones they did catch landed fairly well. I can easily see elements of this episode that Star Trek fans could enjoy and possibly have a chuckle or two. If only this understanding of comedy and this franchise were presented at the start and throughout the entirety of the series instead of at the end. I think Lower Decks would have had a better shot at being a satisfactory show instead of a hollow, forgettable shell. Perhaps, if there is a second season of Lower Decks, the writers can take the few successes of this episode and build a better model for Star Trek comedy and characters for the future of this series. But I won't be holding my breath. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.